Hi, I'm Michelle Hanslow. I'm an Environment Project Officer at Nillumbik Shire Council. Nillumbik is 25 kilometres northeast of Melbourne CBD in a green wedge zone, which has a diverse landscape of urban, rural, bushland and hobby farm properties and an average property size of 1.81 hectares. In fact, the largest private property is only 412 hectares. Since 2019, Council has delivered several externally funded deer control, engagement and education programs to pilot and trial peri-urban deer control approaches, improve community understanding of deer in our landscape, educate and empower landholders to take action to reduce impacts and to help them coordinate their own on-ground deer control programs. Deer have been in Nillumbik for many years, but they've been steadily increasing in number as they've dispersed southwards from Kinglake National Park, a process which has been exacerbated by the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires. Over the last 5 years, deer numbers and sightings have greatly increased, particularly in peri-urban areas where damage to vineyards and gardens is easy to see. Nillumbik's flagship deer control program, the Sugarloaf Link, has been a 3-year project funded with the support of a Biodiversity Response Planning grant from the Victorian government. The 4,000 hectare project area was selected because of its location within a wildlife habitat corridor between the Kinglake National Park and the Yarra River. It has high biodiversity values, active local environment groups and complementary professional deer control works nearby. Community support for the project was overwhelming, with nearly 100 out of the 300 private properties within the project area signing up for free deer control. This level of engagement was in part due to promotion of the project by the local residents and landcare groups, who are very active in protecting native wildlife, and they've seen the rising deer numbers and damage to the bushland. The fact that the works are free was probably a factor too. So following a mail out from council seeking expressions of interest in the project, willing landholders signed an agreement to participate in the deer control program for the duration of the project. We then engaged 2 professional deer control companies through a public tender process. Both have public place permits, which enable them to work in our populous peri-urban areas, as well as harvesting permits to ensure deer can be removed from private properties, and suppressors to reduce noise impacts. Lack of suppressors and public place permits are a barrier to the use of volunteer deer hunters in many areas of Nillumbik. Most of the properties that had signed up were actually too small or densely covered in bushland to be productive sites for shooting. So the contractors selected 15 key properties ranging between 2.5 to 131 hectares in size that they thought would be best for deer control. They then door-knocked neighbours to engage additional landholders to create larger sectors to work across. This door-knocking was incredibly successful, probably because meeting the controllers made the landholders feel more comfortable about having a shooter on their property. Contractors prepared notification plans and shoot plans, which had to be approved by the Divisional Firearms Officer at Victoria Police before being authorised to commence works. Participating landholders and neighbours were notified 48 hours in advance of all planned shoot dates, and operations were generally undertaken monthly on a new moon when the deer are less skittish. Controllers kept in regular contact throughout these processes and provided a summary of deer dispatched at the conclusion of each night. Wherever possible, deer were transported to a local abattoir for processing as pet food. So between late 2019 and mid-2021, 330 deer were dispatched by contractors, 307 were sambar and 23 were red deer. They averaged about 4 to 5 deer per night using either on-foot stalking or vehicle-based shooting. Productivity was highest in the larger properties adjoining the reservoir and nearest to the Yarra River, which both had dense bushland for deer to bed in next to large open grazing areas. Deer numbers decreased after a few months of control activity as the resident deer were removed or learnt to avoid the area, but they increased again after a resting period. Overall, the deer numbers appear to be slowly decreasing. Harvesting the deer was by far the biggest barrier to higher productivity. It's being used because community feedback suggested that animals shouldn't be wasted, and leaving carcasses lying around would be unpleasant for small property owners and their neighbours, and burial is not an option on these properties either. But around 25% of the contractor time was spent retrieving, eviscerating and transporting deer carcasses to local abattoirs within the timeframes required to meet food safety standards set by CrimeSafe. Given the steep terrain, extraction was often a difficult, time-consuming process. Future project success could be enhanced by using deer contractor knowledge to first identify and then engage properties likely to have higher deer numbers and good access for control. Having some ongoing funding would be good to enable us to further fully fund some control programs or be able to test different models of financial contributions from landholders. I think it's beneficial to be able to ensure in advance that your local community is likely to be supportive of the works, as that increases your uptake. And it would be good to be able to reduce costs and enable more time to be spent on control by finding some alternatives to harvesting. Overall, the project has been a huge success. Those landholders that were uncertain about the project are now more accepting of the need for deer to be culled. And we all now know that control works can be undertaken safely and effectively within these peri-urban areas when delivered by professional controllers. The project has also led to the start of other local deer control works, such as on Parks Victoria and Melbourne water managed lands for a broader cross-tenure approach. Deer control is particularly challenging in peri-urban environments because of the proximity of dwellings and a larger number of stakeholders involved. And 3 years ago, Council had little knowledge of deer behaviour and no experience with their management or control. Since then, we've worked through all the issues and developed some best practice guidelines for collaborative deer control to deliver landscape scale projects in these peri-urban areas in particular. And we're now exploring ways that Council can provide small grants to support groups of landholders seeking to undertake community-led deer control. And we'll continue to seek external funds to fund some larger scale deer control programs using professional controllers in our priority areas. Thanks.